You've heard about clicky clacky math rocks, but what about clicky clacky lightning switches? We're half the past way mark. We're past the halfway mark. Thank goodness. Short history lesson. What Veda hasn't started with a history lesson so far? Back at the beginning of the pandemic, I was in a mood to spruce up all of my spaces. Given that I am a remote worker and working from home, I wanted the places that I work in to look nice and kind of reflect aspects of me. That meant taking my streaming space and making it look really nice, making it a very functional streaming space. But one of the things that I wanted to do as part of that was also find little ways to express my style. And my style is like geeky but subtle. While I had already come up with a lot of ways to spruce up the space with like artwork and framing things and whatnot, I took an IKEA desk and I made it mine with some small customizations. Why not the keyboard? A bunch of the people at my workplace before the pandemic had used mechanical keyboards and kind of had them in use at the office. So you got to see like the wide variety of options there were. And so when it was time to upgrade my keyboard that I'd been using for a number of years and was getting kind of grody and old, I thought, hey, let's give this a shot. Let's dive into the world of mechanical keyboards, because there's not that much to it, right? Right? I should point out that the path that I took is probably a longer one than I needed to. Really what I wanted to do was customize the keycaps, which you can just buy. And most keyboards, the caps come right off and you just put new ones on. I could have done that. I mean, not with the keyboard that I had, but I could have bought a keyboard that supported that and been done with it. But I decided to go definitely way deeper than that. Okay, quick background on mechanical keyboards. The way that all keyboards work is by connecting a switch. When you press down a key, it connects some contacts, which sends a signal that says, hey, this is whatever key. So far, so good. Most keyboards do that via a membrane. They have a layer of rubber or silicone or something with some sort of metal attached to it. And when you press down on the key, it pushes down on the membrane, which presses down on the thing and connects the circuit. Bada bing, bada boom. For a mechanical keyboard, you have a physical switch. So when you push down on the key, it's actuating like a lever, which connects a contact. Mechanical keyboard switches fall into, I would say, 3 categories. There's linear, tactile, and clicky. Linear switches make sense if you think about actuation as a curve, which is when you push down on a key, what that curve looks like. So linear is straight up and down. When you push down on the key, it goes all the way to the bottom, and when it hits the bottom, it activates. Cool. Tactile switches work similarly, except there's a bump. So when you push down on the key, eventually it hits some threshold, and then it bumps, which is when the contacts are activated. Clicky are tactical switches, except they make a crap load of noise. People generally get mechanical keyboards for a couple of different reasons. They tend to be more durable. That's not a huge factor for most folks, because I imagine they'll just replace their keyboard. They are more customizable. You can buy ones with different switches, as I was describing. You can also get ones with different lighting, so depending on the keys that you touch might activate the lights differently, which is great if you're using certain applications and you want to know which keys are important. The biggest thing is probably the form factor. So instead of just getting your traditional like rectangular keyboard, you can get a split keyboard where half of the keys are on each side. You can get ones that are ortholinear, so instead of being staggered rows, they're a grid. And people using mechanical keyboards find that they tend to type more accurately. Because, especially with tactile switches, when you press it and you can feel the bump, you have a better sense of when you know you're pressing a key, as opposed to on other keyboards where you're like, you press it and maybe it activated, maybe it didn't, it's hard to tell. My foray into mechanical keyboards hasn't been super vast, but it has been an interesting experience. I should point out that I really didn't have any idea what sort of switches I should be using or what keyboard I should pick. So a lot of my advice, a lot of my where I came from was using the Wirecutter. There's a site called the Wirecutter. It's owned by the New York Times, I believe. And if you're looking for recommendations on things, it's like, here's the best whatever, here's our methodology, etc. So I started there looking for mechanical keyboards, and when I couldn't find what I wanted in the price range that I wanted, I went to some of their like, here are some other things you can consider. So let's talk about the keyboards that I've picked up, and you can kind of see what they look like. First up is the Durgod Taurus K320. This was not on the recommendations from the Wirecutter list, but it was the only keyboard that I could find in the middle of the pandemic. It doesn't have any lights, any RGB lighting. I didn't want that. I've constantly had problems with it. It would accidentally press keys even when I wasn't touching the keyboard. I would need to plug and unplug it to reset it. But this was kind of my first chance to experience tactile switches, or any mechanical switches for that matter. I had a hard time finding keycaps that kind of fit my style, so these are kind of simple-ish, but they're different. They're just a little bit different. Also, there's different sizes of keyboards. This is a 10 keyless, also abbreviated as TKL, and what that means is it doesn't have 10 keys. It's missing the numpad keys in particular, but otherwise it's the same as any other keyboard. Later, when I switched jobs, I had the opportunity to buy new equipment for my work from home setup. And as a result, I had the chance to buy another keyboard and try out another keyboard. So this time I tried out the Magic Force. This is called a 60% keyboard. As you can see, it has no F keys. If you want to access those, you have to hit one of the option buttons on the bottom. These are still tactile switches. It does not include any RGB lighting because I still think it's dumb, or still thought it's dumb. But one of the things that I had found during this entire process was this one person who creates what are called the Magical Girl keycaps. I'd been eyeing them for a little while and I didn't want to make the leap into keycaps too much, but as you can see, they're kind of cute. I like them. I think there was another job switch in there and I tried out the Keychron C1. This is another wired keyboard. Again, doesn't have any RGB. It is an 80% keyboard, so the F keys are present, but some of the other keys are not. Unlike the Magic Force, the switches on this keyboard are hot swappable, which means that if, for whatever reason, I wanted to replace the switches with like clicky ones or tactile ones, I could do that. I should also point out, you can do this without soldering the components in, which is what makes it hot swappable. There are some kits that you can buy to make your own keyboard where you have to solder the components in. I did not want any of that. After that, I took the plunge and I went deep into the world of keyboards, kind of. I wanted to try a split ergonomic keyboard. So I bought the Keybo Iris Revision 7. If you follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen me assembling this, but it's only very recently that I've actually tried using it. It is ergonomic. You can tent the legs, so you can set up the keyboard in a way that works for your hands. It is vertically staggered instead of horizontally. Again, the switches are hot swappable. This time though, it has RGB lights, and I didn't know that. And now I'm kind of thinking that RGB lights are kind of cool. Like, look at that, it's like this keyboard in particular, you can also customize the firmware, so you can change the keyboard layout. You can also change the lighting of that. I have just got the basic layout installed on it, but I think it's kind of cool that you have the option to change those things. And I'm still learning to use this. I tried this for a day, and my typing was atrocious, but the only way to learn is to practice with it. It's a neat, if maybe a bit expensive hobby, and I'm glad that I got to share it a bit with you today. Tomorrow we'll be talking about things that are a little bit more conventional. It's clicky to rock around to rock around to, sorry, no, it's clicky. Cool, I got a free rehearsal because I'm using the Zoom recorder and it's been the primary source of audio, and it was none. So there was stuff going into the camera, which is fine, but it's not great quality, so I gotta start over. I gotta record like half a video over again. And that makes me sad. That makes me very sad. It is hot as balls in here.